Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. If you want to move forward, you can, so you don't feel so far away. If you want to move up here a little bit, that'd be great. Nobody, no takers. Yeah, thanks, Father Bob. Good. Well, thanks for coming out to this Discussions on Development, sponsored by the Ford Family Program in Human Development Studies and Solidarity. This is a lecture series that we have throughout the year. Hopefully by now, most of you have seen our posters for our other events. This is the last one for this year, but those of you who are around next year, look for the poster design for this series, and we hope to see you again next year. Tonight we're very excited to have a wonderful speaker, Chelina Odbert from Kounkuey Design Initiative. KDI is an innovative partnership specializing in the practice of architecture, landscape architecture, and urban planning in areas where environmental degradation compromises quality of life. Since 2006, Chelina has worked with community members in the slum of Kibera, Nairobi, to design and implement a network of productive public spaces. These are open spaces that link physical upgrading to micro-enterprise. She's also worked on participatory planning and design projects in India, Brazil, Honduras, Haiti, Morocco, and the United States. So all over the place. Lots of great experience to hear about. She graduated from Claremont McKenna College and went on to complete her master's in urban planning at Harvard. Chelina and KDI have won several awards for her and for their work. I just want to say that last July, I guess it was, Father Bob Dobb, the director of our program, and I had the privilege of getting a tour of KDI's work with Chelina in Kibera. And it was really fascinating, really interesting, and I think you'll really enjoy what she has to say. And based on that experience, I just want to read one thing from KDI's website, which really, to me, reflects what I experienced and saw there on the ground, and what really kind of resonates with the mission and vision of the Ford program as well. So on KDI's website it says, by working collaboratively with communities from conception through implementation, we build on their ideas, enhance them with technical knowledge and design innovation, and connect them to extant resources. In doing so, KDI empowers communities to advocate for themselves and address the major physical, social, and economic challenges they face. So please join me in welcoming Chelina Odbert.
Hello, and thank you, Father Bob, Tony, and Lacey for inviting me to be here with you guys tonight. It's a real pleasure. As Tony said, I'm Chelina, and I'm one of the co-founders of Kounkuey Design Initiative, or KDI. It's a tough one to pronounce. We are a nonprofit design practice that partners with residents in impoverished areas to implement design solutions that improve the physical, economic, and social quality of life of residents. We do this by building what we call productive public spaces. We started the work in 2006 with what we thought would be a two-week research project in Nairobi, Kenya. And 6 years later, we have a strong presence in Nairobi and have recently begun building projects in Haiti and the United States. I'd like to spend the next 30 minutes talking about our approach to development and the people and process that makes this work possible. I'll then close with a closer look at a few of our projects and then open it up to what I hope will be a lively discussion. So first, the approach. I imagine most of us here today are familiar with the staggering statistics about urbanization, so I won't spend too much time on them, but to summarize, we know that 1 in every 7 people live in a slum, while half of the world's population lacks access to clean water or sanitation. We also know that these numbers are growing fast, and primarily in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, as this map of projected slum population in 2030 indicates. And though informal settlements vary widely in size, character, and age, what most have in common is a lack of capital investment, but not just in infrastructure, though that's often a big one. Settlements also suffer from a lack of investment in natural, human, financial capital, and all of these are equally important to the long-term health of a community. But in our experience, upgrading projects often emphasize single sector improvement, meaning they invest solely in infrastructure or solely in economic development. Our practice is set up to challenge that approach. We instead focus on the interconnectedness of these challenges and attempt to deal with them in single integrated projects. Projects that start with physical design, but by necessity expand to include economic, environmental, and social development components. So where did this idea come from and how did it sort of get its start? Well, I started KDI in 2006 with 5 classmates at Harvard Design School. We launched the initiative as a way to address poor living conditions caused by urbanization that traditional design firms were reluctant to confront. We started with the assumption that slums and informal settlements were not going away, but that a better standard of living for residents based on incremental, practical improvements could be easy to achieve. We received research money to explore this idea in Kibera, Nairobi, and after 2 weeks of design workshops with residents, we returned committed to doing something sustainable. So we then spent the next year designing a pilot project and arming ourselves with the tools that we would need to succeed as a practice. So for example, we took a class at the business school to learn how to write a business plan. We took an engineering course at MIT to better understand the hydrology issues that we were facing. And we took part in a social enterprise incubator where we were able to develop things like a mission, a financial model, a vision. And now our team has grown to include many other classmates, old friends, new colleagues from all parts of the globe and a really wide range of professional backgrounds. At this point, at least half of the people that work on KDI projects are volunteers, meaning that this work literally would not happen without them. As Tony said, our work is really rooted in participatory planning and design. So the most critical player in each project team is our community partner. Our experience has shown us that residents understand the complexities of the issues that are facing them far better than any outsider. So we start with them and we continue to prioritize their participation and input throughout the design, construction, and ultimately implementation phases of the project. The process of participation involves a wide range of activities, especially in the beginning ideas phase. And these range from group discussions to modeling to mental mapping, photography, and sometimes includes what we call provocations. Campaigns like this one aimed not at the residents of the slum or the informal settlement, but at outsiders that are often turning a blind eye to the issues facing these parts of the city. This collaborative process creates an end product designed by multiple authors and multiple critics, all acting within the same landscape. So you may be asking, what exactly is the end product? Well, residents work with KDI to create what we call productive public spaces. These are waste spaces like dumps or polluted rivers or abandoned lands that are reclaimed and redesigned in order to do 3 primary things. First, they're meant to mitigate environmental hazards like these. Also, they are meant to provide basic community amenities, water, sanitation, etc. And finally, they're meant to build community capacity to develop and operate enterprises that generate the revenue that the residents will need to maintain these physical improvements that they've made, and as an added benefit to grow their individual financial wealth. In Kibera, which is a large slum in Nairobi, we've built 3 productive public spaces, and we're soon to start construction on other productive public spaces in the US and in Haiti. But since Kibera is really the birthplace of KDI, let me explain this concept of productive public space through our projects there. First, a little background on the place. So Nairobi is Kenya's capital city and has 3 million inhabitants. Approximately 2/3 of those residents live in one of 200 slums. These are just some of the major ones that are outlined here. Kibera, by most people's assessment, is the largest slum in Nairobi. The estimated population, however, really varies depending on who you talk to. Anywhere between 600,000 to 1 million people seems to be an accurate range. The majority of the land is government-owned, and most residents rent the informal housing structures that are owned by middle-class Kenyans. Most of the time, middle-class Kenyans living outside of Kibera. Kibera has become sort of a poster child for slums or informal settlements, and it's known for many things. Some of them are good, some are not so good. So let's start with the good. It's located just 5 kilometers from the industrial area where many residents are employed, and 7 kilometers from the city center. So this central location makes it a popular and convenient place to live. There's also a strong sense of community. In Kibera, everyone knows everyone. Our field coordinator, Ibra, who you guys met this summer, is from Kibera, and he really can't walk more than 20 feet without being stopped by someone to chat or answer a question. And that's really the kind of feeling all the time when you're in Kibera. But the physical environment of Kibera is tough. There's no trash collection, so everyone puts their trash in the river or burns it. There are not enough toilets. There's only one upgraded or improved toilet per 75 people. And it's also crowded. Up to, as I said, 1 million people live on 220 hectares. And for reference, that's about 2/3 the size of Central Park in New York. So this leaves very little room for things like trees and open space for kids to play or ride a bike. And although there are public water taps like this one, they are unreliable and often contaminated because all of the pipes run above ground on the pathways that people use for circulation. Steady work is also hard to find. Formal statistics put it around 70% of the population living on less than $1 a day. And an inadequate network of roads really limits income generation and access to social services like fire trucks and ambulances and such. So since 2006, residents partnered with KDI have been working to change these statistics through the Kibera Public Space Project. To date, KDI has 3 completed productive public spaces. Actually, the 3rd one is in construction, almost completed. And these are all along the tributaries of the Gong River. Does this have, yeah, which are all of these that you see there. Well, I'm missing a slide, but each site serves about 2,000 residents directly and up to 10,000 residents indirectly. Since we target waste spaces in Kibera, restoration of a site's natural capital is really the first step in any project. So specifically, we reduce pollution through community cleanup of waste and removal of toilets that very often drain directly into these tributaries where we work. We also restore the natural environment through soils rotations and tree planting efforts. And we control flooding and erosion, which is a big problem in Kibera, especially in the areas near the tributaries, through flood protection and soil stabilization, as you see in these gabion banks that we are building. So after we've kind of dealt with restored the environmental capital of a site, we then move on to introduce the needed community amenities as well as the income generating activities that will provide that revenue to keep a site going after it's complete. So to illustrate how this environmental, social, economic puzzle fits together, let's take a closer look at some of the sites. So this is our first site in Kibera, which, if you remember the map, is kind of down at the edge. It was a dump adjacent to this polluted river and filled with human waste and trash. It frequently flooded, making it an isolated space that was the site of many crimes. This site is now home to the only public park in Kibera. It hosts an elementary school and community center whose roof harvests rainwater for use on the site. It has a community office surrounded by a vegetable garden, and a park and a playground with more trees per square meter than anywhere else in Kibera. In addition, there are several small enterprises that now operate at the site that we help the residents to create, including a garden business that sells those vegetables and compost that they make on site, and a women's weaving cooperative, which you see here, that creates and sells these eco-friendly baskets made from a plant or a weed that grows near the site. Each of these enterprises contributes a percentage of its profit to what is called the Site Maintenance Fund. And the rest of the profits go directly to the community members and allows them to invest in other family priorities. The second site is about a 15-minute walk from the first site. And again, we encounter the polluted river. Nearly all residents come here to dump their trash, and 4 toilets in this 100-meter stretch were draining directly into the river. Now those toilets have been replaced with a sewer-connected sanitation center, which you see there, that has 6 toilets, 4 showers, and a city water line where residents can get water, clean water. The site also hosts kiosks and a playground. The site pays for its ongoing maintenance by charging a small fee for use at the sanitation center and also renting the kiosks to local vendors. Site 3 is currently in construction. And this time we find ourselves at a low point in the settlement and the major catchment area for all of the waste coming from the uphill neighbors. So this site takes advantage of a biodigestion toilet in the area and builds on it by providing a water tap, a playground, which is almost finished, a poultry farm, a school and / community center, and importantly, improved drainage and flood control. It's the poultry farm and the water and the school that will generate the maintenance revenue needed for the site. So these projects make an enormous difference for those living immediately adjacent to the sites. But as is the case in most slums, the challenges facing Kibera are large scale. So one project, no matter how great it is, will begin to truly change the systemic problems that are facing places like Kibera. So because of that, our projects are designed as a network, linked together by these water courses that cut through Kibera. And when taken together, these sites begin to form a spine of community infrastructure that serves the entire settlement. And by extension, the larger regional watershed by reducing the pollution coming from Kibera, which is the major polluter within the regional watershed. So, but in order to be successful at this larger scale, KDI, no matter how big we grow or hard we try, we can't act alone. We've from the beginning advocated to those responsible for change at the city and regional scales. And we've been encouraging them to partner with us to help us achieve this systemic impact. And recently, I'm happy to say that advocacy has paid off. And we've now formed formal partnerships with the Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company, who helps us to connect both sewer and water at each of our sites to the main city system, and the Ministry of Environment, who runs what is the Nairobi River Basin Program, another initiative charged with improving life along these tributaries in the watershed. So that kind of gives you an overview of Kibera. Now, after 3 years of working, learning, refining the model in Kibera, we began to apply these lessons learned in Kenya to similar environments in Haiti and the US. So I'll talk briefly about those projects as I begin to wrap up. In Haiti, we've taken the idea of productive public space and adapted it to a rural context. In 2010, we went to the town of Bono in northwest Haiti, which is the poorest region of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So this area is very disconnected. It has very minimal infrastructure and really is kind of a forgotten corner of the country. We were invited by a Haitian NGO that commissioned us to design and construct a special needs children's orphanage, an elderly person's home, and a church/community center. So while there, we started, as we always do, by working with the community, which led to our second project in Haiti. In partnership with a community group called Tête Ensemble, meaning heads together, KDI identified 3 locations within the town where a productive public space could provide a solution to the priority needs of that community. Ultimately, we settled here, which is the town's existing open-air market. The existing market is small. It has very little fresh produce or outside vendors and really isn't selling much at all. In this part of the country and really throughout Haiti, there is a severe food insecurity, and this is due primarily to a lack of access to seeds and little knowledge of agricultural growing practices. This is then compounded by the poor infrastructure that I mentioned and no system for refrigeration or storage of harvests, and what you end up with is a place that really struggles to find a meal, let alone a nutritious and balanced one. So the Bono Productive Public Space will revitalize and strengthen the market by improving the physical infrastructure and adding income-generating opportunities, and then also designing new areas for recreation. The physical infrastructure improvements will include the construction of permanent market stalls, as you see here, a storage depot over here for keeping harvests past when they're initially picked, a small business office, and a recreation area for children of the community, and a community garden, sort of a training garden. The programmatic components will include agricultural training, a small business education program tied to that agricultural training, and basic sort of business leadership skills. The land survey for this project has been complete, and the permission to use the existing market site has been granted by the local government. And it's very interesting because the process for getting permission to use land in this context versus the process for getting permission in Kibera, they couldn't be more different and have very different timelines. But construction of the site here will begin in late summer or early fall. So we've always held that this process that we were trying to create in the global south or in the developing world could be just as effective in the US. And since the beginning, we've been open to opportunities to get involved a little closer to home. That opportunity recently presented itself in a trailer community in the eastern Coachella Valley, an area in Southern California just miles from Palm Springs and Palm Desert, with hazardous living conditions similar in many ways to those in Kibera. It has no formal sewage infrastructure. There's a lack of potable water, and there's limited access to local services and transportation, including a lack of access to fresh food. So after several months spent getting to know the community in the valley, and its stakeholders, we partnered with St. Anthony Trailer Park, which is an unpermitted park where an estimated 600 residents, almost entirely employed in the agricultural business, which is thriving in that area, live with very minimal infrastructure. In early 2011, KDI began a series of community workshops at St. Anthony's to, again, understand this community's most pressing needs. And they identified three. It was improved access to affordable food, a central gathering space to facilitate community organization and education. This is a community that has several labor law campaigns that are always being waged because of the inequities in the in the agricultural industry. But because of the desert heat and because of the limited space, it's very hard for the residents to physically organize around these campaigns. And it will also have, the other need was a safe, climate-appropriate recreation area for youth. So since those initial discussions, we've held at least a dozen community workshops to design a productive public space with residents. So we will take a flooded waste space in the trailer park, which is here, and transform it to house the things that I just described: the meeting space, the playground, the community garden, which is back here. This is the playground, shade structure, barbecue area, and the kind of stage gathering area. And then in addition to the physical site, we've developed a nutritional education and small-scale gardening program that will feed into a couple of kind of incubator kiosks in this area. And construction of this site will begin later this month if we can sort out our grading plan. Now, the conditions at St. Anthony's Trailer Park repeat themselves at over 150 trailer parks just like this in the immediate vicinity, and really throughout that kind of southern part of California. So we've begun to identify other communities in this region where we hope to partner with residents to kind of reactivate and grow a network of spaces like these, similar to the network that we're trying to create in Kibera. So to sum up, all of our work, whether urban, rural, or in the case of Coachella, something in between, is really built on this idea that to truly tackle poverty and to truly make strides in development, projects have to recognize the interconnectedness of the challenges of the poor and attempt to deal with them in an inclusive and integrated process. So in our own practice, we committed to this approach by applying 3 criteria to each of our projects, and I think I'll end with those. Physically, each of our projects should use strong design concepts to create beautiful spaces that provide needed infrastructure and amenities. Environmentally, each project should transform places that pollute into places that remediate. And economically, projects should create income-generating opportunities where people once saw only waste. And then finally, socially, all of KDI projects should build community capacity and political capital among residents so that they can become their own best advocates. As you can imagine, this is no easy task, and we don't always get it right on the first try or the second try. But with each passing year and each new project, the do's and don'ts become a little clearer. The process then gets refined and repeated, and the challenges become just a little bit less daunting. So that's kind of the journey we've been on since 2006, and hopefully we'll be on it for a long time to come and hope to get better each time. So with that, I would like to open it up for discussion.
So I think we'll just let Chelina field her own questions, but feel free to speak up and have a conversation around what KDI is doing. Who wants to start?
I don't really have a question. It's kind of more of an observation. But first off, thank you. And I don't know, there's a couple of us from School of Architecture, but the School of Architecture program is a little bit unique in that sort of traditional architecture, traditional city planning is sort of held in the highest esteem, whatever you take it as our model. I think this sort of community-based approach, in my judgment of it, is closer to the idea of traditional city planning than the master plan approach, which is this is kind of how we're taught and how the way, at least in the United States and the developed world, land is developed. So it's encouraging in that regard, and that it really is truly traditional city planning, and that it's driven by the community. It's really exciting to see. I don't know if you guys agree.
Question.
Sure.
I know that, there's been a history of slums that have developed all throughout the world at different times in history. So are there any models, from different times or places in the world that you've kind of looked at as examples, or that you can learn from? Or do you feel like you're really kind of making, trying to figure these things out from scratch?
Sure. Do you mean examples for upgrading slums or improving
Yeah, from
ones?
the recovery of slum areas
Sure.
in different countries.
Sure. Actually, the great thing about this project is we started it as students. And so because of that, we had this luxury that probably wouldn't be afforded to us if we were just starting a practice when we were kind of in the real world. And that is that we had ample time and opportunity and resources to explore anything and everything that anyone's ever done in the world of slum upgrading, as it's called. And so this model or this approach is really a response to studying everything that went wrong and trying to kind of make some sense of the mistakes that you see repeated and the patterns of failure that you see repeated. And so we really got to a point where we quite literally put up, on the wall in the studio, this list or this set of things that we had to avoid as we were kind of developing our approach to this work. And, really a lot of what you see here. And we have kind of these 6 tenets or principles of productive public space that I didn't show you, but each of those really responds directly to a pattern of failure that we've seen or that we studied in other upgrading programs.
Hey, Chelina.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed one thing that can't be overstated is that you and your group actually plant yourselves in these places and really study and get to know the environment. In visiting Cabrera, I remember passing by a few water tanks that would have, gifts from First Baptist Church of Highland Park, so I'm just curious, what are the challenges and how are you able to work with, whether they be NGOs, missionary groups, church groups, schools, that my assumption is that some are just coming in for, a few days or just giving money, which is great, but, obviously in order to really have sustainable impact, you got to be there for an extended period of time. How do you work with those entities?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think exactly what you described, this kind of dropping in, doing something good and leaving, is one of the biggest pitfalls that we put up on the board of things we had to avoid. So we kind of knew from the beginning that there was no kind of short-term way to do this. But at the same time, we recognized, again, from kind of studying what had already been done, that in Kibera each year, something like $28 million is funneled into Kibera via 200 or more NGOs. And the place really doesn't look any different from year to year as a result of that money. And so another thing that we thought, early on is whatever we do, it can't just be a direct duplicate of somebody who's already doing this. And whatever we do should try to either link up with or fit into other plans or initiatives that are already going on in this area. And if possible, kind of help coordinate some of these repetitive or duplicative efforts. And I would say we know a ton of people and groups in Kibera at this point, and vice versa. They know us. And we work very closely with local government, and we work, hand in hand with community-based organizations. So those are organizations of residents that are legally organized into a group. And I think we've learned over time that that's where you need to start. And, we've tried to work, we're always open to working with other NGOs or hearing people's proposals, but there are very few NGOs in Kibera that want to partner in a way that's committed and long-lasting and there for kind of the duration. And so when we're presented with something that isn't that, which is most of the time, do you want to partner to build X? We have some, a missionary group that's coming for a week and they want to build. We try to, without being dismissive, we try to offer those groups an alternative or give them an alternative suggestion that might fit into some other work that's happening. And if we can't find a way to bring them into what we think would be a sustainable approach, then we usually don't work with them.
I'm just curious, what's the education process of the local community as far as breaking the old habits of just dumping the trash? Are they embracing that pretty well? How's that go?
Yeah, so that's actually a pretty common misconception, I would say, about certainly people in Kibera, but probably in a lot of places like it. I think in a lot of cases there's an idea that people might not know that they shouldn't throw their trash in the river, or that it's not a good idea to use the river as your toilet. And that really, in Kibera especially, is not the case. People know and want to put their trash somewhere that is appropriate and away from them. But there are zero options in Kibera. There's no formal trash collection. There aren't, it's such a big place, you can't kind of walk outside of Kibera and put it somewhere formally. So people collect their trash in their homes just like we do. And then they take it out, and instead of being able to put it in the bin that the truck comes to pick up, the river is there, that equivalent for them, because it's the place where you can put your trash, and then when the rains come, it will move it away from you. So it's not ever hard to educate people not to throw their trash in the river because they don't want to be doing it in the first place. What is hard is giving them an alternative. And that's something that even in our existing projects, I would say is one of our top challenges. We have only mediocre, in my opinion, ways of dealing with the trash because, this program is working in Dandora, which is the main dumping site for all of Nairobi. And that site is full and problematic. So even if your trash goes to the official place, it's only hurting another community. So to really get at the trash problem is huge. And that's, I think, where we're focusing our energies, are good alternatives for residents, and we think the education behind it is already there. Yes. Hi.
I think another thing that helps the residents embrace it is because you involve them and you give them ownership of the project. So that enables them to accept and take to own it. Comment about that, question I had was, at what point does KDI disengage and let the community take over the project?
Yeah, good question. Well, our hope and our kind of plan as we were devising all of this as part of our thesis was that you work with the community, you build the project, that whole thing takes about a year, and then by 18 months in, you are nowhere to be seen. And we really tried that, and the community refused to let it happen. And so the first time we thought, okay, well, that's normal because this is new for them, it's new for us, nobody really knows, we have to figure out how to disengage. But then, as the second project happened, we began to see that no, it wasn't that this was just a first time thing. It was really that there was there's the physical component of the project, and then there's the programmatic component of each project. And the physical component can be done in 12 months, even less than that. But the programmatic component, which is the community development, the economic development, the social empowerment, that takes much longer than 12 months or even 18 months. And so what we found is each of the sites are physically functioning on their own within a year or 18 months. And that's the case of the sites that we have now. But we still provide programmatic support to the various small enterprises that we've helped create, to the community groups that we've helped to form and legally organize and become registered groups. And we are still, with each project, that becomes a more formal process. Not to divert too much, but all of us in this endeavor are designers by training. We aren't economic development specialists. We aren't community development specialists. So everything we do in those two buckets, I guess, is stuff we've learned along the way or have found out via our own interests. So if I think about the three areas that we work in, overall, the physical, the economic, the social, I think that the economic and the social don't have as kind of robust a framework as our design process does. And it's something that each year we try to focus more on and bring people in with that expertise. The idea being, to get back to your original question, that if those departments of KDI are just as good as the design department, then we can have a more formalized process of helping these communities get the kind of skills that they need to run these projects. We can help them start their businesses in a more efficient manner and help them scale them up more efficiently, and then we can get out of the picture quicker on both fronts, both the physical and the programmatic. Yes.
Okay. As a student, it seems way overwhelming to try to imagine starting a business like you did and getting it to the point that you did. Just from your perspective, what helped you get to where you are now from a graduate student at Harvard to where you are now?
Don't ever set out to start a business. Just set out to do a project, or just set out to have one meaningful input into a community or a place that you're working. Because anything else will be far too overwhelming, and you will be kind of bogged down with that weight of these, insurmountable challenges, and that it'll be really hard to get there. So this was, I guess I would have said, if you asked me, before I started graduate school, what do you want to do with your life? I would have said this, but I wouldn't have said, I want to start a business. And that was kind of the accidental part. I found my way to what I wanted to do, but just by doing it tiniest bit at a time. We didn't actually become, so we started in 2006, that was the 2-week research project. But I didn't leave my full-time job in a planning firm until 2010. And so for those first years, we did it as a side project. We'd go in the summers. Before we even had a business, we were sending interns to go work on projects on their summer break, because we didn't have summer break anymore because we were working. So we just kept pushing along, and then finally it was right. And then once it became right, then there's a whole other set of things. Now you have to figure out how to become a 501c3. You have to get accounting structures in place, and by that point you're so deep in it that you're willing to do those awful things. But if you would have told me I would have had to do that at the beginning, I would have never done it. Someone over here.
Yeah, do you think that you could use this kind of design structure and implement it in informal slum, just one that's technically squatting and technically illegal, even though it might have been there for years upon years?
Yeah, that's what this is actually.
Okay.
It has been there for, oh goodness, Father Bob, do you know that, a long time, maybe 100, yeah, years. I can't remember the exact year at the moment, but it's all the land is government owned. These people are technically squatters, although they're kind of informal land processes of acquiring land, but then it's never really yours. And so yes, I think that, in fact, I think that if it were really just a squatted upon piece of land, there's another example in Nairobi, a settlement called Huruma, and because the people squatting had built their own structures, and then it was technically government land, it was much easier for that community to eventually gain official title to that land. And so something like this would work even better in that context, because one of the problems we have here often is that by law you can't build anything permanent in Kibera. So you have to choose your materials carefully. You have to build very durable and long-lasting buildings that look like they could fall over tomorrow, or that they won't be there next month. Yes.
Why is that you can't build anything permanent? Is there?
Because the land belongs to the government, and next year they might want to take it all back and do something with it. So it's just a silly, it's something that really impedes the overall development of progress. But
I had another question.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, the sites that you chose really needed your input and your help, but how did you choose those sites compared to other sites?
Sure, good question. We use what we call an RFP process, request for proposals. So every time we're looking for a new site, we put out this kind of call for proposals to every community group and local government official in Kibera. We invite everyone to this meeting, we tell them about this idea of productive public space, we ask them if they know about the other sites, they usually do, and we say, if your community group has an idea for something like this that kind of fits these 6 definition points of a productive public space, fill out this application, turn it in a week, and then we kind of just go through a selection process, and we look for a community group that has demonstrated success at managing or starting a project in the community. We look at the site, like we look for, sites that really need improvement. If someone brings us like a clean, perfect site in Kibera, we usually say no. So we have this whole process of finding the community partner.
Does your average PPS have any kind of energy demands? And if it does, how are they met?
Yeah, another good question. All of them have energy demands. Energy is another hot topic in Kibera, and I won't even go into it, but there's a really interesting thing that I was asked to write sometime last year, and it's on the Forbes.com or Forbes website. And if you're interested in the electricity, it's a really interesting story of how electricity works there. But to answer your question, yes, the sites do have electricity demands, and we first thought that we would meet them using solar. But the community told us that that was crazy. Like, no way can you use solar. It will be stolen immediately. So then we said, okay, so we thought, well, we just need to design it in a way that it can be taken home at night, or it can be not a security risk. Again, we came back with what we thought was a great idea. No way. If you take it home at night, someone will see you taking it home at night, then you're going to become a target, and someone's going to break in your house and hurt you and take the solar. So then we said, okay, well, the idea you gave us was to steal the electricity the way that everyone does. The idea that we gave you is obviously also very bad, so how do we do this? So the best way we dealt with it so far is there's this program in Nairobi called Adopt-A-Light, and it's basically this big security light that has 10 kind of spotlight things that shine light over a big area. And so the community, our team in Kibera, we have a staff of 6 there that are all people that have been a part of our projects over the years and are now staff. They have become like these huge lobbyists in the local and city government, and so they just kept badgering these Adopt-A-Light people at Nairobi Power until the councilman agreed to give us a light for each site. So that's what we have. Well, I would say that's what we have at the moment, but it takes a lot of time to get things done. So we have the light post and we have the light bulbs. And we have the wires, but they are not yet connected. Yes.
Sort of along the lines of a previous question, what is your level of involvement with the local government in terms of getting these services, the basic services provision like trash collection and water and waste? Is there any sort of support from the government, or is it like what's that relationship like?
Yeah.
I guess
It's different for each service. The best collaboration is in water and sewer. We have a working relationship with the Nairobi Water and Sewage Company, so they help us connect to the city lines, sewer and water. So in that area, it's good. The local government, we work very closely with them. In Kibera, there are chiefs of there's 13 villages in Kibera, and the chiefs are over a certain number of them, and they're appointed, and some are better than others. Most are pretty corrupt. So, everything is a negotiation. So you want to get permission to use the land. Usually someone wants you to pay a bribe. We have a policy of not paying bribes, so then you have to kind of like do the dance and like outlast them until you finally get permission. Or you can be lucky enough to work with a chief that isn't corrupt, which has been the case in our last 2 sites. And then the chief really does everything that they can to move the project along. But there's a limit to what they can do. I mean, everyone, not even in Kibera, even in the formal city, trash collection is a huge problem. So you can get the chief to say, okay, when you guys do the cleanup, bring all the waste here and I'll have city council come pick it up. And that sounds great, and you'll bring the trash and they call them mini Dandoras that will pop up within Kibera. It'll be these huge like waste heaps that'll sit there for months and months and months, and finally, the city council will come. So I find the local government to be, I'm not anti the local government at all. I actually find them very useful, but they're limited in what they can do. There are a lot of challenges, not just in Kibera, but in Nairobi, and there's a lot of corruption.
You mentioned you had to take like an engineering hydrology course to kind of know how to design those things, and I was wondering if you employ any engineers or work with any engineers for these projects.
We have, part of the firm is engineering. We have a pro bono relationship with Bureau Happold, which is a big engineering firm internationally, but they're in their New York office. They do all of our engineering pro bono. And we have someone who's just about to join us full-time who has been working with us pro bono for several years now. Will be with us full-time for the next year, and then we usually have engineering interns each summer. In fact, I think we have a position that we're just about to fill for this summer. So engineers actually, and structural engineers especially, we are always looking for and needing the help of structural engineers.
Do you have a long-term goal for the overall in Kibera, or do you just look at specific sites as you, like you mentioned, the site selection process? Do you have a larger goal?
Yeah, there was a couple of slides that built on each other that were kind of forming this network. That's the long-term goal. Basically, we are targeting these waste spaces along the rivers that run through Kibera. The idea being that those rivers nicely go through the entire settlement. So the idea is that if you can begin to, let's see if I can go back to that slide. If you can begin to build multiple spaces along these rivers, then you can begin to actually address the bigger problem of the pollution in the water. And you can create this spine of infrastructure that is beneficial and accessible to all the residents. Now, that, in our opinion, has to happen with the support of other people and agencies besides us. We don't propose that we build, the 500 sites needed to make this network effective. But the idea is that the network is something that other NGOs could plug into, that other upgrading schemes could adopt and roll out at a larger scale, or even like the local government agencies. I think if I do this, that a lot of people working together could create a useful spine of infrastructure. So those are the 3 sites that are now connected, and the idea is you would keep creating these sites.
Do you have any people that would be willing to plug into your network as of right now?
Yeah, we have, yes, we have both some smaller NGOs that would like to, that are already doing things around water and sanitation, but more kind of single sector, as I was talking about in the beginning, that they only build toilets. And I think we began to influence them with this idea that for the same amount of money that it costs you to build that toilet, you can create some added social value, some economic value by kind of looking toward a more, a project like a productive public space. And then at the other end, we've started this partnership with the Ministry of Environment, whose job it really is to deal with the large scale stuff. And they have kind of said to us, well, we'd love for you to be our branch, the branch of the Ministry of Environment in Kibera. So all the stuff that we need to do there, maybe you can do it for us. And I mean, something like that could work if it were using their resources and that would be the ideal, to have them kind of adopt that model for working in Kibera.
So when you were talking about the restrictions placed on areas that are technically slums by the government and how those are really an impediment to ever changing them, do you see any activism within Kibera from their chiefs and their local government towards addressing restrictions placed on them by the national government? Or do you think that you said a lot of them do you see that happening at all?
Yeah, good question. And I think the answer is yes and no. With the chiefs in Kibera, as I said, they're appointed, and many of them are not from Kibera. They can be from somewhere far away and be transferred there and then be transferred out 6 months later. So among the chiefs that are from Kibera or that kind of have a development mindset, yes, you do see, like the one chief that helped us through our second site and will be part of our fourth site, he's a regular community activist. I mean, that guy will rally entire communities and take them to city council to try to get, I don't know, whatever it might be. So it really just depends.
I'm curious as to what has shocked you most about your domestic site. Oftentimes when we think about challenges to development, it's in an international context. And as a group from the United States working in the U.S., was either shocked you or surprised you or been most difficult?
Yeah, another good question. Well, I think just finding out that there was some place 2 hours from a place that I call home that had the same problems as Kibera, had issues of access, had toilets draining directly into the ground, water with arsenic and sand. In some was probably the biggest shock. Like when I first read about it, I thought, oh, this can't be the case. Someone's like writing a piece in the newspaper to make a name for themselves or something. Like it has to be exaggerated. So I think that was the biggest shock. And then as we got to know the communities, then you would hear like the exact same story from a parent in Kibera who says they put bags over their kids' shoes in the morning when it rains so that they don't get mud on their shoes when they walk out, and then are identified as like the kid from Kibera. And the exact same story was told to me by a parent in this community in the Coachella Valley. And so moments like that, moments like that are surprising. I think the most difficult thing, and I'm hesitant to say this because it could also be the most difficult thing on a Kenya project. Bureaucracy has many different faces. And there is the Kenyan form, which is a little underhanded and not very transparent. And then there's the domestic form, which is super transparent and very heavy-handed. And I think I mentioned, we're supposed to start construction next week, but because of the longest and most boring story about grading permits and what's on the books, that shows this area as farmland, and having to adhere to these like very old like zoning regulations that don't take into account at all what's actually present on the site is a whole another challenge that is really laborious and tedious to get through and really hard.
Maybe one more question if anybody has one.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned some of those things that, those do's and those don'ts that you kind of learned. Can you mention some of those don'ts that you would now put up on that board that you mentioned?
Yes, I can. And I think one of the biggest ones is, maybe we already knew this going in, but I think it's always repeated. Don't put poor people, like people that don't have a lot of income, don't put them all in the same box, because the minute you do, you're going to miss out on very valuable information that's needed to have a successful project. And I would say the more that you kind of try to like help with the best intentions, but at the same time are kind of, I don't know, feeling sorry for lack of a better term, then you lose your ability to be an effective partner in a project, and you are taken advantage of, you or your organization are taken advantage of in a way that doesn't help anyone, not the people that you wanted to help, and not you as a professional trying to get something done. So that's one.
Thank you. I know there's another little event coming up here in about 20 minutes, national championship, Lady Irish go beat up on Baylor, hopefully. But this was the main event. So, Chelina, again, we just want to thank you so much for coming and sharing with us a really respectful and sustainable process and development, and one that I think we can all admire and seek to be a part of in our own life. So, again, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming.